On December 29, 2024, the passengers of Jeju Air Flight 2216 had no reason to worry. It was supposed to be just another routine flight from Bangkok to Muan, South Korea. Passengers and crew were ready for the smooth descent into Muan International Airport. But what they didn't know was a sudden, unexpected event. As the aircraft neared its destination, something went terribly wrong. The pilots suddenly aborted their landing and climbed back into the sky. Something wasn't right. The pilots struggled to regain control as the situation worsened. The plane circled back for another attempt at landing, but this time, things went horribly wrong. The landing gear failed to deploy. No one on board could have predicted what was about to happen. What could it be? What went wrong? This is the story of Jeju Air Flight 2216. The day seemed like any other. December 29, 2024, was an ordinary winter day in South Korea, with clear skies and chilly temperatures typical of the season. The weather at Muan International Airport was calm, and visibility was good for the scheduled flight arrivals. There was nothing in the air to suggest that the day would turn into a nightmare. The Boeing 737-800 had taken off earlier from Suvarnabhumi Airport near Bangkok, Thailand, and was en route to Muan International Airport in South Korea. The flight, lasting approximately 6 hours, had carried 181 people on board, 175 passengers, and 6 crew members, including the pilots and flight attendants. Most of the passengers were returning home after a short, 5-day Christmas package tour in Bangkok. Among them were families, professionals, and government officials, including 13 passengers from provincial and municipal government positions. The passengers ranged from a 3-year-old child to elderly adults, the oldest born in 1946. Of the 175 passengers, the majority were South Korean nationals, while 2 were Thai citizens. As the plane approached Muan, all appeared to be going according to plan. The pilots were in communication with air traffic control, guiding the Boeing 737-800 into position for a standard landing. The Boeing 737-800 is one of the most popular models in the world, prized for its efficiency and reliability, particularly on short-haul routes. With a capacity to carry around 160 to 180 passengers, it's often seen flying on domestic and international flights, like the one between Bangkok and Muan. This aircraft type is praised for its fuel efficiency, helping airlines reduce operating costs, making it a trusted choice for airlines around the globe. This particular aircraft had been in service for several years. As with all aircraft, it had undergone regular maintenance checks to ensure safety, and records indicated that the aircraft had been properly maintained. Just a month before the crash, Jeju Air resumed its international flights from Muan International Airport following a suspension due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The airline was operating 4 weekly flights between Muan and Bangkok, a route that had started on December 8th. In the 48 hours leading up to the crash, the aircraft completed 13 flights, with stops in Muan, Jeju Island, Incheon, as well as international destinations like Beijing, Bangkok, Kota Kinabalu, Nagasaki, and Taipei. According to Jeju Air, there were no issues found during the aircraft's safety pre-check before its final flight. However, like all machines, no one could predict what might go wrong on this particular day. The captain was the pilot in command, having years of flying experience. They were responsible for the overall operation of the flight and were no stranger to navigating challenging conditions. Beside the captain sat the first officer, the co-pilot, whose role was to assist in the operation of the aircraft. As the plane approached the runway, the crew's training and experience would be tested like never before. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this video, please consider subscribing to stay updated on more interesting aviation stories. At 2:28 a.m. ICT on 29th December 2024, Jeju Air Flight 2216 took off from Suvarnabhumi Airport in Bangkok, Thailand, bound for Muan International Airport in South Korea. As the plane neared Muan International Airport, the situation started to shift. At 8:54 a.m. KST, the aircraft was cleared for landing on runway 01. The airport's weather was still favorable, but the aircraft's descent was just beginning to show signs of trouble. At 8:57 a.m., the crew was warned about the potential for a bird strike. a rare but serious event that can lead to catastrophic engine failure. This warning came as the plane was preparing for its landing. While bird strikes are not always immediately disastrous, this particular event would prove to be a turning point in the flight. Within 1 minute of the bird strike warning, the worst-case scenario unfolded. At 8:56 a.m., the pilots of Flight 2216 were forced to issue a Mayday alert to air traffic control, signaling that they were in immediate distress. They had collided with a flock of birds, which caused significant damage to both engines. This was not just a minor strike. The birds that hit the plane, believed to be a species of migratory duck, caused severe engine failure. Both engines, crucial for the aircraft's continued flight, were incapacitated by the bird strike. Without engine power, the aircraft could no longer maintain altitude or control, making a safe landing increasingly unlikely. The pilots, however, quickly decided on a go-around, an emergency procedure in which the aircraft aborts its landing, climbs back to a safe altitude, and attempts to re-establish control for another approach. The decision to perform a go-around was a brave one, but it was far from a guaranteed fix. The plane was now fighting against time and gravity, with 2 failed engines making it nearly impossible to achieve the lift needed to regain full control. The pilots managed to initiate the go-around at 8:59 a.m., but the aircraft's situation was dire. Even though they attempted to gain altitude and reorient the plane for a second landing attempt, the damage to the engine severely hindered their options. The crew immediately requested to land on runway 19, the opposite runway, at 9 a.m. The request was granted, but there was a critical issue. The aircraft's landing gear had failed to deploy properly. We want to hear your thoughts. Do you think more should have been done to prevent these bird strikes? Drop a comment below and let's discuss. With no landing gear, the aircraft had no choice but to perform an emergency belly landing. A belly landing is a risky process, typically used when landing gear is either malfunctioning or cannot be deployed. In this case, the pilots had to descend the aircraft onto the runway without the usual stabilizing support from the wheels. The second landing attempt began, but the aircraft was already in a critical state. At 9:03 a.m., Jeju Air Flight 2216 touched down 1,200 meters along the runway, far beyond the normal touchdown zone. The Boeing 737-800 had no landing gear to absorb the shock of impact, and so it skidded along the runway on its engine nacelles. As the plane slid down the runway, it maintained a nose-up attitude, which made the situation even more dangerous. The plane continued its slide, eventually overshooting the runway by another 250 meters. The engines, which were still in operation despite the bird strike, dug into the berm that supported the airport's instrument landing system localizer, causing a catastrophic collision. The collision with the berm created an explosive impact that resulted in a fire breaking out on the aircraft. The damage was catastrophic. Both engines were embedded into the structure of the berm, and the tail section of the aircraft detached, rolling over and coming to rest inverted. The crash site was chaotic. Local residents said they saw flames and sparks originating from the aircraft's right wing and heard explosions and metal scraping before impact. Some reported seeing a flock of birds being ingested into the right engine, causing a fire. The only survivors were 2 crew members rescued from the tail section of the aircraft. A local restaurant owner heard loud bangs that sounded like the backfiring of a motorcycle engine, leading him to rush to the restaurant rooftop and record a 54-second video on his cell phone of the aircraft's descent and crash, which subsequently went viral. Around 9:03 a.m., emergency services received multiple distress calls about the crash. In response, a Level 3 emergency was declared, marking the highest alert. According to the National Fire Agency and the Ministry of National Defense, a massive team of 1,562 personnel was deployed to the site, including 490 firefighters, 500 military personnel, and 455 police officers. Among the first responders, 1 survivor was rescued at 9:23 a.m., while the other was pulled from the wreckage at 9:50 a.m. from the plane's tail section. The fire was fully extinguished within 43 minutes, despite the intense flames. The 2 flight attendants seated in the back of the plane were the only survivors. They stayed conscious during the crash. Hydraulic rescue tools were used to free one of them, who had been trapped under a fallen cabinet. Both attendants had serious injuries. One had broken ribs, a shoulder blade, and upper spine fractures, while the other had injuries to her ankle and head. They were treated at different hospitals in Mokpo before being moved to a hospital in Seoul for more care. By 1:36 p.m., fire crews switched to searching for bodies in the wreckage. Back at Muan International Airport, a completely different kind of work was underway. The families of the victims, many of whom were in complete shock, had started arriving at the airport, hoping to hear news of their loved ones. There, they were met by government officials who provided them with critical information and emotional support. A temporary morgue was set up inside the airport's hangar, where the bodies were brought to be identified. In those hours after the crash, time seemed to move slowly. For the families, every minute felt like an eternity. Don't forget to hit that like button and share it with your friends. The more people know, the safer we all become. While the recovery of bodies and the notification of families took place, a critical investigation began almost immediately. Flight data recorders, one of the few tools that could provide insight into the chain of events leading to the crash, were recovered from the wreckage. The flight data recorder, though partially damaged, was retrieved alongside the cockpit voice recorder, which remained intact. However, both of them had stopped recording moments before the crash. One of the earliest leads in the investigation was a bird strike. Just 6 minutes before the crash, air traffic control at Muan International Airport issued a warning to the pilots about the presence of nearby birds. Soon after, the pilots confirmed seeing a flock of birds flying beneath the aircraft. Unfortunately, one of the birds struck one of the engines. This bird strike caused significant damage to the engine, which led to a hydraulic system failure. The failure affected the plane's landing gear, making it impossible for the pilots to lower the gear properly. Without functional landing gear, there was no way for the aircraft to safely land. The investigation revealed that Muan International Airport had a high rate of bird strikes, higher than any other regional airport in South Korea. The airport was located near wetlands and feeding grounds for migratory birds, creating a perfect storm for bird strikes. Even though there were recommendations to install sound cannons, lasers, and warning lights to scare off birds, these measures had been delayed due to ongoing construction projects on the runway. What made the situation even more concerning was that only one person was assigned to deal with the bird problem on the day of the crash. According to regulations, airports should have at least 4 personnel to handle bird strikes during busy flight times. This made the airport even more vulnerable to the risk of bird strikes, contributing directly to the disaster. Meanwhile, experts also raised concerns about the landing speed of the aircraft. When the pilots tried to land, thrust reversers, which help slow the plane down after landing, weren't functioning properly. The wing flaps, which help the plane slow down, also weren't fully extended. This left the plane traveling much faster than usual, making it even harder to stop. Perhaps one of the most shocking findings in the investigation was the concrete barrier at the end of the runway. This barrier was originally placed to support a localizer, an antenna that helps guide planes during landing. However, this barrier was too close to the runway and violated safety standards. Investigators concluded that, had the barrier not been there, the aircraft might have skidded further down the runway and stopped without hitting anything. This structure was also problematic because it was not designed to break apart upon impact, which is the global best practice for airport safety. International aviation standards require that runway overrun areas be free of obstacles, yet this barrier violated those standards by being only 202 meters away from the runway's end. Airport officials later admitted that this barrier should have been better positioned to ensure the safety of aircraft. Experts have criticized the design of this barrier, arguing that it shouldn't have been placed in such a dangerous location. In fact, other international airports, like Gimpo International in South Korea and Incheon International, follow best practices by mounting their localizers and similar equipment on frangible, breakable supports, making them much safer in the event of an accident. The investigation didn't stop there. South Korean authorities also launched a search and seizure operation at Jeju Air's headquarters and the airport's aviation office. The CEO of Jeju Air was even placed under a travel ban while investigators analyzed mobile phones found at the crash site. This raised concerns about the airline's preparedness and response to the crash. After that tragic crash, the South Korean government declared Muan a special disaster zone and announced a national mourning period that lasted until January 5, 2025. This period gave the country time to mourn the lives lost and show respect for the victims. The government set up 90 memorial altars across 17 cities nationwide, allowing citizens to express their grief. An estimated 158,000 people attended these memorials to honor the victims. As the country mourned, people from all walks of life paid tribute. At Muan Airport, messages of sympathy and ritual offerings were placed along the perimeter fence. The Thai embassy in Seoul even lowered its flag to half-mast to honor the victims. However, the response wasn't without frustration. Many family members expressed anger and dissatisfaction at the lack of real-time updates on the passengers' conditions. Some were also upset at Jeju Air for holding their press conference in Seoul, far from the crash site, leaving families feeling abandoned. Even Choi Sang-mok, the acting president, was confronted by grieving relatives when he visited the area, as they voiced their concerns about the lack of communication. In addition to the national mourning, local governments took steps to show solidarity with the victims. Even the South Korean government postponed major events, such as the economic policy announcement for 2025, to allow the nation to focus on the disaster. While mourning took place, Jeju Air faced a significant decline in bookings, with 33,000 domestic and 34,000 international reservations being canceled. This was followed by a series of safety inspections on all Boeing 737-800 aircraft operated by South Korean Airlines. Authorities ordered these inspections after the crash and extended the deadline to ensure all planes were thoroughly checked. The families of the victims formed a support group and vowed to hold off on funerals until all the victims had been identified. It wasn't until January 1, 2025, that all the victims were confirmed, and the first funeral took place the following day. A few weeks later, on January 20, 2025, the South Korean government set up a task force to assist the families of the victims. This team, made up of government officials and local authorities, worked to provide ongoing support. The tragedy also saw a rise in defamatory online posts, with at least 8 people being arrested for spreading harmful content about the victims and their families. More than 400 derogatory posts were taken down by authorities. This accident is the deadliest aviation disaster involving a South Korean airliner since the 1997 crash of Korean Air Flight 801 in Guam, and became the deadliest aviation accident on South Korean soil, surpassing the 2002 crash of Air China Flight 129 that killed 129 people. This was the first fatal accident in Jeju Air's 19-year history. Thanks for watching. If you found this video insightful, make sure to hit the subscribe button and leave a comment below. We'll be bringing you more stories. Stay tuned.